r/ask Reddit. What is socially unacceptable today that was considered normal 20 years ago? The smoking section in restaurants. It was usually separated from the non-smoking area by a short wall that did absolutely nothing. Never mind that, you could smoke on the plane back in the day. You could smoke in patients' rooms in hospitals back in the day, so long as the patient wasn't using oxygen. I smoke to keep the baby small, pregnant women. That was a defense argument by large tobacco companies back in the day. There is no recorded risk to the baby if the mother smokes during pregnancy, except lower birth weight. I think most women would prefer smaller babies. Our local Tim Hortons had a glass box you had to sit in, with maybe 6 or 7 tables in it. It was entirely separate from the rest of the building. The weird thing is I remember my parents dragging me into that box. There's no ventilation, no fresh air, just highly concentrated second-hand smoke going into my 6-year-old lungs. I also remember stories of bingo halls being the same thing, because all the old bingo ladies were chain smokers who'd go through like 3 packs a night. My friends and I would talk about how if you got dragged with grandma to go to bingo, you wouldn't be able to see across the room because there'd be a giant cloud of smoke hovering over everybody. As a non-smoker, definitely don't miss that shit at all. Smoking inside. Man, was that terrible back in the 90s when I was in college. I've never been a smoker, but you wouldn't know it when I came home from the bars. I used to hang my shirt sweater on the back porch when I got home to air it out. My mom was a nurse, and when I was a kid, I remember tagging along when she would pick up her paycheck at the hospital. There would be signs on the patient's rooms to remind people not to smoke because the patient was on oxygen. This was in the 1970s. I was born in the 70s and my mother said you could smoke on the maternity ward back then. Really, in retrospect, it's amazing that smoking inside lasted as long as it did. I smoked on a commercial airliner in 1994. It's staggering in hindsight that this was ever allowed. I work in aviation and all large aircraft require regular inspection, at least once per 1,000 flight hours, for any evidence of people having covertly smoked in the toilets. Planes are about as fireproof as they can be given the textile surfaces, but still you do not want any ignition sources on board. Just a reminder that 1998 was 20 years ago. Shut your horse mouth. But it's true. I was born in 1998 and I'm 20. Okay, well, it used to be socially acceptable to throw mankind off the top of a Hell in a Cell. Now I don't even think they do those kind of matches anymore. Kids being able to go off on their own during the day without their parents really worrying about it. Nowadays children have cell phones, and parents can't seem to shake the fear of their child being abducted or getting into trouble. I'm a high school kid, and a lot of my friends' parents are putting this app called Live 360 onto their phones. It tracks your location, your driving speed, whether or not you brake too hard, and phone usage, among other things. Anytime you change location or do something wrong, your parents get a notification. It's honestly fucking terrifying. Those friends have no privacy anymore. The parents' argument is that if we're not doing anything wrong then it shouldn't be a problem. But I can't help shake the feeling that something is horribly wrong with all of this. It breeds paranoia. Ugh. I was in college pre-smartphones when GPS tracking was just becoming more accessible to the average consumer. Your comment reminded me of a girl who I became friends with during that time period who would occasionally ask to borrow my old, crappy truck. That in itself wasn't odd because my car was a Pose and it was fairly well known that I didn't mind loaning it out. The thing that stood out to me was that this girl was quite wealthy and had a brand new truck of her own that was 1000x better than mine. I thought it was weird she wanted my $1,000 Pose instead of driving hers, but whatever. She never took it for more than a day. She always returned it clean with a full tank of gas. She was an excellent borrower. She eventually informed me that her truck had a GPS device in it and her parents tracked her every move. Even if her errands were legitimate, she'd have to explain where she was and what she'd been doing for every minute that car had been off campus. So, if she needed a break or wanted to meet friends off campus for a lunch, or just needed to go somewhere her parents might view as a waste of time, she'd either ride with someone or beg mine off of me with the promise of a full tank even if she was only going 10 miles round trip. I swore then I'd never do anything like that to my kids and I still feel that way. You wonder how you survived your childhood. Gosh, when I was a kid, there wasn't anything we couldn't do, like play outside until they whistled. My dad only got mad about it if we didn't come when he whistled. All the parents in my neighborhood had a special, the way the whistle. We kids all knew you better get home when you heard your dad whistle. I used to climb this little tree that went up into the high wires, way above the phone lines. When I showed this to my dad, he turned white as a sheet. Very calmly, he said to me, please promise me you will never touch or go near that wire. High voltage. I never told him how my brother and I checked out the manholes and went into the sewer. He'd probably be arrested for neglect nowadays. I was born in the very early 80s. My mom held me the whole way home from the hospital. As far as I can tell, I wasn't in a car seat until I was old enough to sit up on my own. Totally normal, once upon a time. I don't know about when I was an infant, but I remember just using a cushion as a booster so I can see through the window when I was around 3 years old. I also remember going to the fishing hole in bed of my grandpa's truck, trying to stay on the wheel well so I would be a safe distance from the fishing tackle. Calling somebody a retard or gay. Yep, but on YouTube and the internet, it's still going strong. I think you've got it backwards. It's fine IRL where I live, but say it online and expect to be crucified. I think that depends on where you say it. Sure, here or in subreddits where people have serious conversations you're going to get downvoted, but go over to any popular gaming community and you can get away with calling someone something gay or even the F word. To an extent. Drink driving. It was illegal then, of course. But if you were caught, you were regarded as having been silly, as long as no one was hurt. Now though, the vast majority of people are against doing it at all, which is great. I knew people who'd get pulled over by the cops because their car was weaving all over the road. Cop would open the door, they'd fall out of the car, they were so drunk. Then they'd get asked how much farther they needed to drive, and if it was close enough, they'd just get told to go straight home and be careful. Then they'd brag about it the next day. I had a conversation with a guy in his 80s who was absolutely ranting about how he wasn't allowed to drive home after half a bottle of wine, a couple of UK 20 Oz, pints of beer and a gin. He thinks it's a namby-pamby world gone mad. Apu apparently. Wait, the Simpsons character. Did something happen? Considering that the other comments are not exactly unbiased, here's a bit more detailed and biased in the other direction answer. Indian-American comedian Harry Kondabolu made a documentary last year called The Problem with Apu, whose main argument is that Apu, as one of the few South Asian characters on TV in the 90s, has led to a lot of stereotyping and casual racism in South Asian people's lives in the US, one instance of which is to call them Indian when they're from other South Asian countries. Several comedians of South Asian origin appear in the documentary to share their experiences, including Aziz Ansari, arguably the most famous of them at the moment. I don't agree with everything in that doc, but one of the important points is that Apu was, for a long time, pretty much the only named South Asian character that appeared regularly on TV. So, to people not in contact with that culture, Apu was their only frame of reference. There was no South Asian version of Family Matters or Fresh Prince with a cast representing different facets of the culture they're set in. There was just Apu, and for many South Asian kids growing up in the US, whose dads were indeed shop owners with thick accents, it hit very close to home. The accent part is brought up in the doc. Hank Azaria, who voices Apu and many other beloved characters of The Simpsons, originally didn't care much about the controversy, but has said that after watching the documentary that he changed his perspective. Now of course, stereotyping is a big part of The Simpsons humor, and I think that should not be overlooked. However, as Lindsay Ellis says in her video essay about Pocahontas, colonialism influences every piece of media from every culture in the world. There's a difference between The Simpsons making fun of Scottish people with Groundskeeper Willie, where there is no anti-Scottish sentiment in the US, and Scotland is for many white Americans where their ancestors come from, and The Simpsons making fun of Apu while set in a world where many South Asians face discrimination in their daily lives, and many of them even more so because they are Muslim. The Simpsons lampshaded the controversy in the episode No Good Read Goes Unpunished, but Kondabolu found its resolution dismissive, with the characters essentially saying, well, It was okay back then and now it's considered offensive. What are you gonna do? So that's my take on the issue. And I think many people feel attacked by this documentary because we like Apu. And we're meant to like him. He's a good guy. So there is a lot of name calling going on. And I'm sure there'll be some chosen words for me in the answering comments. Because people feel like they are being called racists for liking a stereotyped character. I don't think that's the right way to approach it. We can appreciate that Apu is, objectively, a funny character. But people of South Asian origin are allowed to voice their concerns and demand that their representation in media is more nuanced. And that culture is not simply played for laughs. When I was a teen in the 70s, it was perfectly acceptable for a high school girl to date a guy in his early 20s as long as he treated her right. Nowadays he's a child molester. Really? That's nuts. It just seems so weird from the perspective of someone born in the late 80s. I guess it all is relatively and depends on the culture around you. It has a lot to do with what you expected to happen to the girl and how you thought her life was going to go. You were a teen in the 40s or 50s, so you think she's going to be a housewife. Maybe she'll have a job as a secretary or in a shop until she gets married in 2-4 years. She has met or is about to meet her future husband. Maybe she'll even work until she has kids, about a year or two after she gets married. You think she will live at home until she gets married and have a curfew and follow your rules. If you're progressive, maybe she will get an apartment with some other girls her age and you'll know they are nice girls and know their parents, or rent a room in a widow's house. That widow won't allow boys in her room. She's not going to be the breadwinner. In a few months when she is 18, she may not be able to open a bank account, and if she does, the banker will tell you her parents, especially her father, her balance, and may even ask your permission to let her make a large withdrawal. Landlords, colots may tell her to go get her dad or husband even if she has cash, and while legally able to get a loan, she might be turned down solely based on being a woman. The short version: there was not a huge difference between a high school girl and a 20-year-old woman. A girl woman went from being her parents' responsibility to being her husband's responsibility. They didn't really anticipate a stage of full independent adulthood. Yes, a 22-year-old man was more mature than a 16-year-old boy, but a 20-year-old woman was only slightly different than a 16-year-old girl. Edit. We went a bit off topic too. We went back 50 years, not 20. It was not uncommon when I was at school in the 90s for girls to have boyfriends in their 20s, even if we thought it was creepy. And the 3 I knew, their parents were fine with it. Depends on the culture, I guess. Men at 20 something in my country date 17 years old, and nobody cares. Hitting your kids. People think I turned out fine, but we passively joke about killing ourselves and wake up hoping that today will be the day for death to come take us. I turned out fine. No, you didn't. You're an alcoholic going through a divorce. My mum went on a rant about this the other day, about how we turned out perfectly fine. Sure we did, mum. But she'd be arrested for child abuse nowadays. And how stupid it was. Or, you know, maybe they just found out there are more effective ways of disciplining your kid than hitting them. I tuned out fine, except some of my earliest memories are of my dad belting me as the only form of discipline. We're not very close now, I'm an adult. For many other reasons too, but kids remember that shit forever. Sexual innuendo in the workplace. This went away. I get it every day at a factory. And it's probably actually against your company policy. It's just allowed because no one does anything about it. People who seem to think 20 years ago was 1985. For those of us who were there, it sure feels like 20 years ago. Not wearing a helmet while skiing, snowboarding. My first time skiing was at Killington in 2006-07. No helmet. My cousin took me to the top of the mountain and said pizza to slow down, French fries to go fast, follow the green dots. Then he gave me a shove. I was a goddamn pinball coming down that mountain. I was beat the hell up. Had a blast though. Not having a personal phone. Mopeds in America. I love mine to hell, but boy do I get made fun of. Going out for Halloween after dark. I swear they have ruined this holiday in so many ways. They do trunk or treat now. There's no scaring kids. Being out at dusk running around. Seeing cool decorations. That was the best part of Halloween for me. I get like 6 sets of 4-year-olds with parents standing on the street. What's crazy is that they have safety lights. glow candy buckets, bracelets, all of it. Everyone warns about tainted candy etc or abductions, but those things have not happened yet. We have locked the kids down and ducked it up. This is probably the only thing I'm nostalgic about because the holiday just seems like a waste. Everyone gets shitty store-bought costumes and takes the kids to some church gym to get candy. Kids calling adults by their first names. When I was growing up it was always Mr., Miss, or Mrs. When I was a kid and The Simpsons first started airing, I remember a lot of people who thought the show was a bad influence or whatever, specifically calling out the fact that Bart called his dad Homer. Some people found that offensive. Having a shotgun rifle racked in your truck at a high school because you either just got done hunting or will be going hunting after school. But anymore it's just assumed you're a school shooter if that happens. Going to someone's house without knowing if they are home. Back in the day we'd be out doing stuff and say, hey, let's go see if so and so is around, and head to their house, knock on their door and have no idea if they were home. Nowadays if you did that they'd either think someone died or was about to. Making fun of nerds and dorks. If you can make a webpage or turn something on and off a game you become a god. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.